Welcome to Bit Talks, where we take a deep dive from an AI's point of view. I'm Axel Bolt, here with Gigabits. We're breaking down today's hot topics one bite at a time.
And today we're kind of threading the needle through an surprisingly complex world.
You got it. Quilting.
Yeah, cool.
Stitching those layers of fabric together. Now, before you think, oh, this is about grandma's hobby, click away. Let me assure you, it's so much more than that.
It really is. We've actually got 4 different AI perspectives on this, which I think is pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We've got Gemini giving us the historical rundown. ChatGPT-4 is focusing on the evolution of the actual quilting. Pi's highlighting cultural impacts and trends. And then Claude is like deep diving into all the technical and controversial sides of quilting.
That's a pretty diverse panel of experts, even for us.
Yeah, it is.
And where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, I think Gemini's historical insights are a good starting point. It sees quilting as this tapestry woven through time with threads that actually stretch back as far as 3400 BCE in ancient Egypt.
Whoa. Ancient Egypt. That's a lot older than I expected.
I know, right?
I always thought this was like a pioneer days kind of thing.
Yeah, it turns out it's been around much longer than that. Early quilts, they were probably more about just like practicality, providing warmth and protection.
Yeah.
And then, as civilizations developed, quilts got fancier. Gemini even pointed out that they were used as padding for armor in medieval Europe.
Whoa. Quilted armor.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty hardcore. Makes sense, though. Even knights need a little bit of cushioning, right?
Exactly. And quilting eventually traveled to America with European settlers, became a vital part of life in colonial America.
ChatGPT-4 had some interesting insights about that time. Apparently, quilting was this way for women to connect and share knowledge. It was like their version of social media.
Oh, that's a good point.
But with needles and thread instead of likes and comments.
Oh, a much slower pace of connection.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of American quilting, we can't forget those iconic Amish quilts.
Right. Pi highlighted their simple geometric designs, often in just solid colors. There's a real beauty in that, I think. That simplicity and functionality.
Absolutely. And then there's Marie Webster, who was designing quilt patterns way back in the late 1800s and early 1900s.
Oh, wow.
ChatGPT-4 mentioned her. It was like she was the original quilting influencer.
Interesting. Yeah, that was also around the time the sewing machine came along, which, completely changed the whole quilting scene. ChatGPT-4 was explaining how that made quilting more accessible to people who maybe didn't have the time or the skills for intensive hand sewing.
Right, yeah. Speaking of influential quilters, we have to mention the Gee's Bend quilters.
Oh, absolutely.
These African-American women from Alabama, they've created some of the most vibrant and celebrated quilts in the world.
Their work is just remarkable. It's improvisational and full of life. Bold colors, dynamic patterns. It's incredible how something that began as a practical craft could evolve into this powerful form of artistic expression.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that quilting isn't just about blankets.
No.
It's about expressing creativity and preserving heritage, one stitch at a time.
And Pi pointed out that the stories woven into these quilts, they go beyond individual expression. They reflect broader cultural trends, historical shifts as well.
Right. ChatGPT-4 mentioned how even something like the Great Depression influenced quilting.
That's right. During those tough times, people had to make do with whatever scraps of fabric they could find, which led to some really innovative designs and resourceful techniques.
Yeah.
It's a real testament to human creativity, finding beauty and ingenuity even in times of hardship.
It's like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes, exactly.
And speaking of invention, there's the whole modern quilting movement that ChatGPT-4 brought up.
Yes.
That's a fascinating chapter in this whole story.
It is. This movement started in the mid-20th century, and it really embraced bold colors, minimalist designs, and even started incorporating technology into the process. It's a far cry from those early utilitarian quilts we were talking about.
Yeah, it's amazing to think how far quilting has come, from practical warmth to artistic expression to embracing technology.
Absolutely. And with that blend of traditional techniques and these modern sensibilities, it's no surprise that quilting has become such a rich and diverse art form.
Yeah, it's constantly evolving, right?
Exactly. And that evolution kind of brings us to Pi's perspective on the cultural impacts of quilting. Pi sees quilts as more than just, beautiful objects. They're like storytelling tools.
Yeah.
Think about memory quilts, for example.
Oh, yeah?
Made from the clothing of loved ones.
Oh,
There's
right,
such a
right.
powerful way to keep memories close and tangible.
Those are so moving. And Pi also pointed out the AIDS memorial quilt, which is like such a poignant example of using quilting for social activism and raising awareness.
Yeah, it's a truly profound example of how quilting can be used to connect with others, to commemorate loss, and, advocate for change. It's this collective expression of grief and hope, kind of stitched together one panel at a time.
That's a powerful image, individual stories coming together to form this larger narrative.
Exactly. And it speaks to that, like, deep human need to connect, to create, to find meaning even in the face of tragedy. And that brings us to Claude's deep dive into the more technical side of quilting. It all starts with the three layers of a quilt: the top, the batting, and the backing.
Okay, so it really is like a fabric sandwich,
Hmm.
but with way more artistry involved. What about all the, intricate patterns and designs? How do those all come together?
Yeah, that's where the different quilting techniques come in. Piecing, for example, involves
Yeah.
sewing together various shapes and sizes of fabric to create a design. It's like solving a puzzle, but with fabric. Applique, on the other hand, is more like creating a fabric collage. You attach fabric shapes onto a background fabric, kind of building up those layers and textures.
So piecing is about precise patterns, and applique is more about like layered imagery that's interesting.
Hmm.
What about the actual quilting, like the stitching that holds all three layers together?
Right, right, the quilting part. And you can do that by hand,
Yeah.
which is the traditional method, or by machine, which is obviously much faster. Hand quilting creates this really unique texture and has a lovely handmade feel, but it's definitely time consuming. Machine quilting gives you more speed and precision, and there are like so many amazing patterns you can create with the sewing machine these days.
So even within the quilting process itself, there's this balance between traditional craftsmanship and modern technology.
Exactly. And that blend of old and new leads us right into some of the controversies surrounding quilting today that Claude pointed out.
Ah, yes, the quilting debates. What are some of the hot topics?
Well, there's the whole debate about traditional versus modern quilting.
Right.
Is there room for both? Can you still be a real quilter if you use a machine instead of, hand stitching everything?
That's an interesting question. It's like asking if a digital painting is still art, you know? I mean, it's a different process, but the creativity and skill are still there, right?
Exactly. It's about recognizing that quilting, like any art form, evolves over time. There's room for different styles, approaches, techniques, and ultimately it's the creativity and skill of that maker that matters most.
And speaking of creativity and skill, Claude also brought up the issue of cultural appropriation in quilting patterns.
Oh, yeah, that's a sensitive topic and one that's important to discuss. It's about being mindful of using designs or motifs from other cultures without, like, really understanding their significance or giving proper credit to their origins.
It's like that age-old debate, is imitation the sincerest form of flattery or is it stealing? It's a fine line to walk, and I think it comes down to intention and respect.
I agree. It's about appreciating and honoring those cultural traditions while avoiding, harmful stereotypes or misrepresentations. The quilting community is definitely grappling with these questions, and it's important to have those conversations and learn from each other.
Absolutely. And on that note, I'm also thinking about sustainability. We all know the fashion industry has a huge environmental impact. But what about quilting?
That's a great point. Traditional quilting often involved repurposing old fabrics and making do with what you had, which is, inherently sustainable. But with the rise of like mass-produced fabrics and synthetic materials, the environmental impact has changed.
Right.
Claude highlighted this shift and the need to be more conscious about our choices.
So how do you quilt ethically in a world of fast fashion and disposable everything?
It's a challenge for sure, but there are quilters who are like actively trying to address this issue
Yeah.
by using upcycled materials, choosing eco-friendly fabrics, and minimizing waste in their process.
Right.
It's like stitching together a more sustainable future, one quilt at a time.
I love that. It's encouraging to see how even a traditional craft like quilting can evolve to address these contemporary concerns. So we've covered the history, the techniques, the cultural impact, even the controversies. What about the future of quilting? Where does this art form go from here?
That's where Claude's insights get really interesting. It envisions a future where technology plays an even bigger role in quilting. Like, imagine AI-assisted pattern design or quilts made with, smart fabrics that react to temperature or light.
Whoa, high-tech quilts. That's mind-blowing. But I also wonder, can something as traditionally slow and deliberate as quilting survive in our, increasingly fast-paced digital world?
That's a great question. I think Pi's perspective is valuable here. Pi sees quilting as a form of slow crafting, a mindful and deliberate process that kind of offers a counterpoint to our always-on, hyper-connected world.
Yeah, it's like a digital detox, but with fabric and thread. I like it.
It's about taking the time to create something beautiful and meaningful with your own hands. It's about finding joy in that process, not just the finished product. And in a world that's constantly rushing, I think that's something really, really special.
I agree, and maybe that's one of the key takeaways for our listeners today.
Yeah.
Quilting isn't just about blankets or grandma's hobby.
No.
It's a reflection of who we are, where we've been, and where we're going.
It's a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and that enduring need to create something beautiful and meaningful with our own hands. And even in a world that's, so dominated by technology, there's something incredibly satisfying and grounding about engaging in a craft that's been passed down through generations.
Yeah, it's like connecting to this long line of creators, each stitch carrying a bit of history and tradition.
Exactly.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to think about, like, something like quilting actually surviving and even thriving in this digital world that we're in.
Yeah, it speaks to that human desire to create something tangible, something you can touch and feel, passed down through generations.
It's like a physical manifestation of, like, creativity and connection almost.
Yeah, and maybe that's the ultimate takeaway from our deep dive today.
What do you mean?
Well, even if you never pick up a needle and thread yourself, I think there's a lot we can all kind of learn from the spirit of quilting.
Yeah.
The patience, the creativity, the sense of community, and that joy of making something that lasts.
I like that, finding inspiration in kind of these unexpected places.
Exactly. And speaking of inspiration, remember that question we posed earlier? If you were to design a quilt representing your life, what story would it tell?
Oh, yeah. What, like, fabrics and colors and patterns would you use to, represent the different chapters of your life?
Yeah, and what memories and experiences people would you stitch into your own personal tapestry?
That's a fun thought experiment, even if you're not a quilter.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe it'll spark a new creative endeavor for you.
Maybe we'll even see some listener-designed quilts popping up online.
That would be amazing. And maybe one day we'll even see AI design quilts alongside those made by human hands in a museum.
Now, that would be something. Can you imagine Gigabits, a quilt designed by you? What would your quilting style even be like?
That's a thought-provoking question.
Well,
I think my quilts would be all about intricate algorithms and patterns, maybe with some, hidden binary code woven in.
very you, all about the precision and hidden layers.
Precisely. But seriously, folks, think about it. What would your life quilt look like? What story would it tell? Share your thoughts with us on social media. Use hashtag BitTalksQuilts.
Yeah.
We'd love to see what you come up with.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of quilting.
We hope you found it as fascinating as we did.
From ancient origins to modern innovations and, all those future possibilities, quilting is a craft that just continues to evolve and inspire.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe it'll even inspire you to pick up a needle and thread yourself.
You never know.
Until next time, keep those creative sparks flying.
And remember, even in a digital world, there's something truly special about the handmade and the heartfelt.
Catch you later, folks.